New York City, 8 p.m. A high-end steakhouse in Midtown. The air smells of charred fat and expensive bourbon. A hedge fund manager slides a heavy, matte black card across the table. It is a silent, frictionless motion. There is no cash changing hands, no counting of bills, no physical weight to the transaction. The waiter taps the card against a sleek glass terminal. For a fraction of a second, a digital signal bounces from this table to a server farm in Virginia, then to a bank in London, and back again. The screen flashes authorized. To the diners, it feels like magic. To the restaurant owner, it feels like a puncture wound. On a $2,000 dinner, $40 just evaporated. It did not go to the waiter as a tip. It did not pay for the dry-aged ribeye. It simply vanished into the digital ether. This is the paradox of modern commerce. We have built a global economy on the back of a free convenience that is actually the most successful private tax in human history. Welcome to the global toll booth, where the gates never close and the price of entry is a permanent slice of everything you buy. Imagine a conversation in the back office of that steakhouse between the owner and a network representative. The owner holds up the monthly statement, pointing at a line item that looks like a mortgage payment. "Why am I paying you 3% on every bottle of wine?" the owner asks, his voice tight. The representative doesn't blink. "You aren't paying for the wine," he says calmly. "You're paying for the fact that the man in the bespoke suit doesn't carry $3,000 in cash. You're paying for the guarantee that his money is real. And most importantly, you're paying because if you stop taking this card, he'll take his business to the steakhouse across the street." The owner looks at the math. If he cuts the cards, he loses 30% of his revenue overnight. If he keeps them, he loses his margin. By joining the few who understand this system, you realize that Visa and MasterCard are not banks. They do not lend money. They do not take deposits. They are pure infrastructure. They are the rails upon which the world's wealth travels, and they charge a fee for every mile. The toll is the price of belonging to the modern world. To understand the mechanism, stop thinking of a credit card as a piece of plastic, and start thinking of it as a specialized filter. Imagine a giant funnel positioned over every cash register on the planet. Every time a consumer drops money into that funnel, the filter catches a tiny percentage before the rest hits the merchant's bucket. This is the merchant discount rate. Within that rate sits the most powerful lever in finance, the interchange fee. The mechanism works like this. The network sets a price that the merchant's bank must pay to the customer's bank. Because the network sits in the middle, they dictate the terms to everyone else. It is a brilliant bit of game theory. If Bank A wants to attract wealthy customers, they offer a card with huge travel rewards. To pay for those rewards, they need a higher interchange fee. Visa and MasterCard oblige by raising the toll for that specific premium card. The merchant has no say in this. They either accept the high-fee Infinite or World Elite cards, or they accept no cards at all. The choice is an illusion. The scale of this friction is difficult to wrap your head around. We are talking about tens of trillions of dollars flowing through these digital pipes every year. If you took every dollar spent on Visa and MasterCard networks and stacked them as physical cash, the pile would reach the moon and back several times over. But here is the revelation that should keep you up at night. This isn't just a fee on luxury goods or high-end dinners. It is baked into the price of a gallon of milk, a litre of gasoline, and a pair of school shoes. Even if you pay in cash, you are paying the toll. The merchant has already raised their prices to account for the average cost of card acceptance across all their customers. You are subsidizing the airline miles of the person standing in line behind you. But as the world moved from physical malls to digital storefronts, This invisible tax didn't just stay steady, it found a way to grow. And that growth was fueled by a discovery made in the boardrooms of the 1990s. The network effect is a trap from which there is no escape. Bloomington, Minnesota, 1992. The Mall of America opens its doors. It is a cathedral of consumption. 4 stories of neon lights, indoor roller coasters, and thousands of cash registers. In the early 90s, the battle for the wallet is still being fought. People carry checkbooks, they carry wads of 20s. But there is a silent shift happening at the point of sale. Imagine a mother of 3 standing at a checkout counter. Her kids are screaming, the line is 10 people deep, and she is frantically writing out a check. The cashier has to call a manager to authorize it. The people behind her are sighing, checking their watches. Then, the person in the next lane simply swipes a piece of plastic. The transaction takes 5 seconds. The friction vanishes. This is the moment the trap was set. It wasn't about debt or interest rates. It was about the psychology of time. Visa and MasterCard didn't sell credit. They sold the elimination of embarrassment and delay. They realized that if they could make the payment disappear into the background of the experience, the consumer would stop looking at the price of the transaction and start looking at the convenience of the lifestyle. Picture a smoky boardroom in 1995. A network executive is pitching a mid-sized regional bank CEO. Why should I issue your card instead of just sticking to my own local brand? The CEO asks. The executive leans in. Because your local brand is a paperweight in Paris. It's useless in Tokyo. If you issue a Visa, your customers can spend money anywhere on Earth. We provide the rules, the security, and the connectivity. All you have to do is put your logo on the plastic. The CEO counters, but what's in it for my bottom line? The executive smiles. Every time they swipe that card at a grocery store, the merchant's bank will pay you 2%. We call it interchange. You don't have to do a thing. We handle the clearing, you take the cash. The CEO realizes this is free money. The more cards he issues, the more tolls he collects from merchants he has never even met. He stops being a lender and starts being a participant in a global tax collection agency. He signs the deal, and the network grows another tentacle. This mechanism is best understood through the party principle. Imagine you are hosting a party. If only 3 people show up, it's boring. If 100 people show up, it's an event. Visa and MasterCard are the hosts of the world's largest party. The network effect states that the value of a network increases exponentially with every new participant. For the merchant, the calculation is brutal. I hate the 2% fee, but everyone is at the party. If I don't go to the party, I die. For the consumer, I want to be where the merchants are. The networks realized they didn't need to be liked. They just needed to be ubiquitous. They created a closed loop where the 2 most important players, the buyer and the seller, are both locked in. But here's the trick. They don't charge the buyer. Charging the buyer would create friction. Instead, they charge the seller, knowing the seller will quietly pass that cost back to the buyer through higher prices. It is a shell game where the person paying the fee doesn't know they are paying it, and the person receiving the bill feels they have no choice but to pay. By the late 90s, the checkbook was a relic. The toll booth had been successfully installed at every major retailer in the developed world. But the networks weren't satisfied with just the big players. They wanted the corner bodegas, the local plumbers, and the emerging world of the internet. As .com became the buzzword of the decade, a new frontier opened up. In the physical world, you could still choose to use cash, but on the web, cash didn't exist. To participate in the future of the economy, you had to use the rails. The duopoly of Visa and MasterCard was no longer just a convenience. It was the gatekeeper to the digital age. But as they consolidated power, the cracks began to show. Merchants weren't just annoyed anymore. They were starting to organize. They realized that while they were fighting each other for pennies in profit margin, the networks were taking a guaranteed cut of every dollar, regardless of whether the merchant made a profit or not. The golden age of the toll booth was about to meet its first real challenge: the cold reality of the ledger. Chicago, 2005. A windowless conference room in a corporate headquarters. A team of analysts for a major grocery chain is staring at a spreadsheet that is 50 columns wide. The lead analyst circles a number in red. "Our interchange fees just surpassed our healthcare costs," he says. There is a stunned silence. For a company that operates on a razor-thin 2% profit margin, paying 2% to a payment network is the difference between growth and bankruptcy. The sensory details of the room are sharp. The hum of a projector, the smell of stale coffee, the frantic clicking of calculator keys. They are realizing that they are working for Visa. Every pallet of strawberries moved, every gallon of milk sold. A portion of that labor and logistics is being siphoned off by a company that doesn't own a single truck or grocery shelf. The golden age of the toll booth was a period of absolute extraction. The networks had reached a point where they could raise fees almost at will, knowing that the merchants were too dependent on the swipe to ever rebel. But the analysts in this room are starting to wonder. What happens if we just say no? Imagine a hypothetical legal deposition between a merchant attorney and a network executive. "You set the fees for thousands of banks simultaneously," the attorney says, leaning forward. "Isn't that price fixing?" The executive doesn't flinch. "We don't set prices," he replies smoothly. "We set default rates to ensure the system functions. If the banks had to negotiate with every merchant individually, the costs would be 10 times higher. We are providing efficiency." The attorney scoffs. "Efficiency? You charge more for a premium card than a standard one, even though the data transmitted is exactly the same number of bits. How is it more expensive to process a transaction from a rich person?" The executive smiles a thin, practiced smile. "The rich person expects a higher level of service. The fee funds the protection, the fraud detection, and the rewards that keep them spending. If you want their business, you pay for the access." This is the core of the defense. They aren't a monopoly, they are a multi-sided platform. They balance the needs of the banks, the consumers, and the merchants. But in reality, they are balancing a scale where the merchant is always on the bottom. The toll isn't based on the cost of the service, it's based on the value of the hostage. To hide the magnitude of the toll, the networks created the four-party model. It is a masterpiece of complexity designed to diffuse blame. Party 1 is you, the cardholder. Party 2 is the isplier, the bank that gave you the card. Party 3 is the acquirer, the merchant's bank. Party 4 is the network, Visa or MasterCard. When you buy a $100 jacket, the money doesn't just go from A to B. It goes through a car wash of fees. The acquirer takes a cut for the terminal. The network takes a scheme fee for running the rails. But the biggest shark is the interchange fee, which the acquirer pays to the issuer. Why does the merchant's bank pay your bank? To incentivize your bank to issue more cards. It is a circular flow of money where the merchant pays for the privilege of the consumer being bribed to use the card. On that $100 jacket, the merchant might only see $98. The missing $2 is split between the 3 other parties. The network itself takes the smallest slice, But because they sit at the centre of every transaction globally, those tiny slices add up to billions in pure, high-margin profit. By 2010, the invisible surcharge had become a structural part of the global economy. In the United States, fees were averaging around 2%, while in Europe, regulators were starting to smell smoke. But the most brilliant part of the strategy was the no surcharge rule. For decades, Visa and MasterCard forbade merchants from charging a different price for cash versus credit. This meant the cost of the toll was perfectly hidden. If a loaf of bread cost $3, it cost $3 for everyone. The cash user was effectively paying a shadow fee to cover the merchant's card costs. This created a massive, silent transfer of wealth from the unbanked and the poor to the rewards-chasing affluent. But the scale of this transfer was about to become so large that it couldn't be hidden anymore. The world's largest retailer, a company with more gravity than some nation-states, was about to look at the toll booth and decide it was time to tear it down. The battle lines were drawn in Seattle, and the fallout would reveal just how much power the networks truly held. London Heathrow Terminal 5. The First Class Lounge is a sanctuary of brushed steel, velvet chairs, and free-flowing vintage champagne. A traveller sits in a corner, tapping a sapphire blue card against his chin. He just booked a flight to Tokyo using points he earned by buying office supplies for his small business. To him, the system is a triumph. He is winning the game of capitalism. He feels like he's getting something for nothing. Now, shift the camera to a small convenience store in a working-class neighbourhood 5 miles away. A man is buying milk and bread with crumpled £5 notes. He has no rewards card. He has no lounge access. He is paying the exact same price for that milk as the man in the lounge would. But hidden in that price is the margin the store owner needs to cover the fees from the sapphire card. The man with the cash is literally paying for the champagne in the lounge. This is the rewards cross-subsidy. It is a reverse Robin Hood mechanism where the most vulnerable participants in the economy fund the luxury perks of the most wealthy. The toll booth doesn't just take money, it redistributes it upward, hidden behind the sheen of customer loyalty and platinum benefits. November 2021. An internal memo circulates at Amazon's UK headquarters. The tone is cold. Visa has increased their cross-border interchange rates 5-fold post-Brexit. It is no longer sustainable. Imagine the phone call between an Amazon VP and a Visa director. "We are the largest retailer on the planet," the VP says. "We aren't paying a 1.5% toll. We'll ban your credit cards in the UK starting January." The director's voice is steady. "You can't do that. Your customers love their Visa cards. They'll just shop at your competitors." The VP hits back. "We are Amazon. We are the market. If we tell them to use MasterCard or a debit card, they'll do it. You're overplaying your hand." For a few weeks, the world watched a $1 trillion retailer go to war with a $1 trillion network. It was the ultimate stress test for the duopoly. Could a merchant finally break the network effect? Amazon was gambling that their brand was stronger than the plastic in people's wallets. They were betting that the convenience of Prime was more important than the convenience of the swipe. It was the first time the toll booth operator looked at a driver and saw someone who might actually crash through the gate. But as the deadline approached, the tone changed. The mechanism behind the Amazon fight was a specific post-Brexit loophole. While the European Union had capped interchange fees at a tiny 0.3% to protect consumers, the UK's exit meant those rules no longer applied to cross-border transactions. Visa and MasterCard immediately hiked their fees from 0.3 to 1.5%, This wasn't a slow increase. It was a 500% jump overnight. Why? Because they could. The mechanism of multilateral interchange fees allows the networks to set the price for thousands of banks at once. In a competitive market, a 5-fold price increase would be suicide. But in a duopoly, it's just a strategy. If both Visa and MasterCard raise their fees, where does the merchant go? They are stuck in a pincer move. Even for a giant like Amazon, the math was terrifying. Those fractions of a percent represent hundreds of millions of dollars in bottom-line profit. The Amazon conflict revealed that the toll isn't a fixed cost of doing business. It is a variable tax that can be adjusted whenever the political or regulatory landscape shifts. The rails are private property, and the owners can change the rent whenever they like. January 2022 arrived. The deadline for the Amazon Visa ban was days away. Then, suddenly, a press release. Amazon and Visa have reached a global agreement. The ban was called off. The terms were secret. Analysts suspect Amazon got a special rate, a private discount that no smaller merchant could ever dream of. This is the dark side of the toll booth. It rewards the massive and crushes the small. If you are big enough to threaten the system, you get a side deal. If you are a local coffee shop, you pay the rack rate. The Amazon blink proved that the network is too entrenched to be defeated by a single merchant, no matter how powerful. It solidified the duopoly's position as the permanent infrastructure of commerce. But while the networks won the battle in the UK, a larger war was brewing. In Washington, D.C. and Brussels, regulators were looking at the 2% tax and seeing a systemic threat to the economy. The crash wasn't coming from a merchant rebellion. It was coming from the slow, grinding gears of the law and a new technology that promised to bypass the rails entirely. Washington, D.C., a humid afternoon in the capital. A senator holds up a standard plastic credit card. "This," he says, his voice echoing in the chamber, "is the only utility in America that can raise its rates without asking a single regulator for permission." Behind him, graphs show the skyrocketing revenue of the payment networks. The sensory details are heavy. The mahogany desks, the rustle of papers, the intense heat of the television lights. This is the moment the Credit Card Competition Act was born. The realization is hitting the political class. The duopoly is acting like a sovereign power. They set the rules for what can be bought and sold. They tax every transaction, and they have more data on American spending habits than the IRS. The crash for the networks isn't a stock market collapse. It is a loss of legitimacy. For 50 years, they were the heroes of convenience. Now, they are being framed as the villains of inflation. Every time a politician needs a scapegoat for rising prices, they point at the 2% toll. The gate is starting to creak under the weight of public anger. Imagine a meeting between a lobbyist for the networks and a congressional staffer. "If you pass this bill," the lobbyist warns, "the rewards will vanish. No more free flights. No more cashback. The middle class will lose their perks." The staffer looks up from a binder. "The middle class is already paying for those perks through higher prices at the pump and the grocery store," he says. "You're just taking their money and giving a fraction of it back as a gift and calling it a benefit. It's a bribe paid with their own cash." The lobbyist shifts gears. "And what about fraud? Without our fees, who pays for the security that keeps the system safe?" The staffer counters. "The technology to move money securely costs a fraction of a cent. You're charging 200 times the cost of the data. That's not a security fee. That's a monopoly rent." This dialogue captures the essence of the regulatory war. The networks claim they are protecting the consumer. The regulators claim they are protecting a racket. The crash begins when the public stops believing the rewards are free and starts seeing them as a high-interest loan they never agreed to take. The walls are closing in, and for the first time, the duopoly looks vulnerable. The precedent for this crash is the Durbin Amendment of 2010. It was a targeted strike on debit card fees. Before Durbin, banks were charging around 44 cents for every debit swipe. After the law, that fee was capped at about 22 cents for large issuers. It was a massive victory for merchants, but it had an unintended side effect. To make up for the lost revenue, banks eliminated free checking and cut back on debit rewards. The mechanism of the toll booth is like a balloon. If you squeeze it in one place, it bulges in another. Visa and MasterCard didn't lose. They just shifted their focus to credit cards, where fees remained unregulated. This created a two-tiered system where debit transactions became cheap, but credit transactions became even more expensive to compensate. The mechanism proves that as long as the underlying rails are private and proprietary, regulation is just a game of whack-a-mole. To truly lower the toll, you don't just need new rules, you need a new road. You need a way to move money that doesn't involve the four-party model at all. And that road is currently being built by the network's greatest nightmare, the central banks. While the US and Europe fight in court, the real threat is emerging from the East. In India, a system called UPI, Unified Payments Interface, allows people to move money instantly from bank to bank using a phone, with zero fees for the merchant. It has decimated the growth of card networks in one of the world's largest economies. In Brazil, a similar system called Pix has taken over. These aren't private networks, they are public utilities. For the first time in history, the toll booth has a free alternative. If you can tap your phone and pay the merchant directly with no middleman, why would you ever use a card? Visa and MasterCard are looking at these maps and seeing a world that is learning to live without them. The crash is the realization that their business model only works if there is no competition. But as they move to protect their turf, they are making a final, desperate move. They are trying to become the rails for the digital currencies of the future. The gate is closing, but the toll collector is trying to buy the whole road. Silicon Valley, 2024. A server room so clean, it looks like a hospital. Rows of blinking blue lights represent millions of heartbeats of the global economy. This is the new face of Visa and MasterCard. They aren't just plastic cards anymore, they are the cloud. They have spent billions acquiring fintech companies, data aggregators, and fraud prevention startups. The smell is ozone and sterile air. They are transforming from a payment network into an identity and data network. Even if you don't use their card, you might be using their security software to log into your bank, or their data to get a mortgage. The aftermath of the regulatory war isn't the death of the duopoly, it's their evolution into an invisible utility. Like electricity or water, you don't think about it until it stops working. But unlike water, this utility is owned by shareholders who demand a 20% return. The toll is no longer just on your spending, it is on your data, your movements, and your digital footprint. They have moved from the wallet to the very architecture of the internet. The systemic threat is that we are building a world where it is impossible to exist without paying a private fee to a digital gatekeeper. Imagine a final conversation between a tech architect and a CEO. We've successfully tokenized the entire payment flow, the architect says. The merchant never sees the card number. The bank never sees the itemized list. We are the only ones who hold the master token that connects the two. The CEO nods. So, even if the regulators cap the interchange fee to 0, what happens? The architect smiles. We charge a tokenization fee. We charge a security as a service fee. We charge for the analytics. The rails are still ours. We've just renamed the toll. This is the chilling reality of the aftermath. You can regulate a price, but you can't easily regulate an ecosystem. By becoming the providers of trust in an untrustworthy digital world, Visa and MasterCard have made themselves indispensable. If the toll booth is dismantled, they will simply build a security checkpoint in its place. The name of the fee changes, but the direction of the money remains the same. Out of the pocket of the producer and the consumer, and into the coffers of the infrastructure owner. This isn't a financial scandal, it's the final stage of late-stage capitalism, where the middleman becomes more powerful than the buyer or the seller. The systemic threat isn't that the system will fail, it's that it will work perfectly, forever. The mechanism of this final stage is total integration. In the past, you could opt out of the system by using cash. But in a world of smart cities and IoT devices, cash is being phased out by design, not by choice. When your refrigerator orders milk automatically, it uses a pre-authorized token. When you walk through a turnstile at a stadium, your face is your payment. All of these conveniences are built on the same private rails. The mechanism of the toll booth has expanded to include every interaction we have with the physical world. The duopoly has realized that the greatest profit doesn't come from a high fee on a few transactions, but from a tiny, unavoidable fee on every transaction. They are becoming the digital tax authority of the planet, but without the accountability of a government. If they decide a certain merchant is a risk, they can unplug them from the global economy with a single keystroke. They have the power to define who can participate in commerce and who is an outcast. This is the ultimate toll. Not just your money, but your permission to exist in the marketplace. Look at the card in your wallet one last time. It isn't a tool, it's a leash. Every time you use it, you are reinforcing a system that makes the world more expensive for the poor and more profitable for the few. The global toll booth is the most successful piece of financial engineering in history because it made us fall in love with our own extraction. We celebrate the miles, the points, and the free upgrades, while the foundation of our economy is slowly eroded by a 2% friction that never stops. This isn't over. As the world moves towards central bank digital currencies and blockchain payments, the duopoly is already there, building the gates and polishing the terminals. They aren't afraid of the future. They are designing it to ensure the toll stays in place. The next time you tap to pay, remember the Manhattan Steakhouse, the Amazon Rebellion, and the invisible surcharge. You aren't just buying a coffee. You are paying for the privilege of living in their world. The gates are open, but the price is higher than you think. Join us at Capital Curriculum as we continue to map the hidden plumbing of power. The more you know, the harder it is for them to hide the toll.